Hello there again. Now we're going to have the lesson about Jesus feeds his disciples. This again is after Jesus rose from the grave, and after the whole thing with Thomas and meeting his disciples, Jesus had told his disciples to go ahead and to meet them, that he would meet them in Galilee. So he sent them on ahead. The memory verse for today is from Psalms 34, verse 10, and it says, "They that seek the Lord shall not want any good thing," meaning that God provides for the things that we need. So we'll get right into it because I'm hoping to be able to give you a little bit of a testimony at the end if I can. So Peter and some of the other disciples were in Galilee. Jesus had promised to meet them there. The disciples were down by the lake, and Peter looked at a fishing boat rocking gently in the water. You know what it's like when you're waiting on somebody? The time seems to go so slow. Well, remember, Peter and the other disciples were professional fishermen. That's what their job was. That's the way that they got money and supported themselves and their family, was by fishing and selling the fish. So Peter is seeing this boat rocking gently in the water, and they needed money to buy food and clothes. And Peter remembered when he and the other disciples had been fishermen, Jesus had called them from their fishing to follow him. Now Peter knew that they would get the money to buy the things that they needed. And if you remember, we had a lesson about when Jesus was during his ministry and the disciples were with him, that one of the tax collectors came to Peter's house and said, "Doesn't your master pay taxes?" And the miraculous way that Jesus paid his taxes. So Peter remembers that, you know, that they needed money and how Jesus provided that. If you don't know the lesson, ask your mom or look it up, because I sometimes will give little nuggets like that to make you curious. But it was a really, it definitely applies a lot, and love that message. So Peter said, "I'm going fishing, and we can sell the fish and buy what we need." So Peter is thinking, remember the lesson we did just a couple lessons back today, that it says to lean not on your own understanding, but trust in the Lord. Well, Peter decided, hey, we need money, we need food, so hey, let's go, let's do something about it. Peter was a let's go and do kind of fellow. So the others said, well, we'll go too. So the disciples all got into the boat and they started fishing. It's what they do. The disciples climbed the boat, and soon they were on the lake fishing. They kept looking. Now remember, they didn't all have poles. They fished with a net. They would have nets with weights on them, and they would throw the nets into the water and then pull them back in to hopefully catch fish into the net. So they kept looking at the nets, but there were no fish. While they waited, they talked about Jesus and all the wonderful things that he had done. I'm sure that they just couldn't stop thinking. They saw wonderful things. They saw miracles happen. They saw, they heard Jesus teach about God and about heaven, about how they should live their life and what it means to follow him. And so they had a lot to talk about. All night, Peter and the other disciples fished. All night they looked in the nets, but they did not catch not one fish. Professional fishermen, and they caught not one fish. Sometimes when you're doing things, for you older kids, when you're doing something and there's just no results, maybe ask God, is this really where I'm supposed to be? Is this really what I'm supposed to be doing? Because sometimes he'll let that happen for a reason to get you to turn into another direction. He had a big point to make for the disciples. Not one fish. Morning came, and the men were tired and hungry. Now I can be tired and patient, or I can be hungry and patient. But I know me, and I cannot be hungry and tired and patient. So these fellas were hungry and tired, and I don't know about their patience, the Bible doesn't say. So morning came, and they were tired and hungry, and a man was standing on the shore down by the water. He called to the men in the little fishing boat, "Friends, have you caught any fish?" "No," said Peter and the others. "Put your net on the right side of the boat, and you will catch some fish," said the man. Now, they knew, they were professionals, and they knew morning was coming. You don't catch fish during the day, in the morning. They were coming back. Nighttime is the time to catch fish. So they were coming back, and they have casted, I'm sure, 100 times on the right side, 100 times on the left side, and not one. And when you have worked and worked and worked, and nothing happened, and for someone to ask you, well, just do it one more time, and you're tired and you're hungry, we don't know about their patience, but I would think that their reaction would be like, really? You don't think that what difference does it make, right or left? There's not a fish in this sea. But they did. But do you think they obeyed? Do you think they did, or did you think that they were like, forget it, mister? Well, they did obey. And I've learned something recently, and I had to take note of it. It's one of those things when you hear something, you hear somebody preach, and you're like, oh, I need that. And they said that obedience is God's love language. And I love that, because for me, my love language is it's called words of affirmation. Tell me something. Tell me something that you like about me, something that I did. Your words matter to me. And for some people it's gifts and all these things. But for God, to show God that you love Him, see, rather than, don't give me a diamond ring, tell me something. Give me something I can hold on to, something I can hold in my heart. But for God, it's obedience. When you obey Him, when you don't lean on your own understanding, and when you're not putting your trust in yourself, which is the Lord dealt with me about this particular lesson, because I have worked so hard all my life, and I had nothing to show for it. But I was kind of like this. Hey, I know what to do. I'll get a second job and a third job and all that. So God resonated with me with this lesson many a times. And obedience is His love language. When we obey, despite what we think, despite what we think we know and understand, and it doesn't quite add up, and God says do it, when we obey, that's telling God that you love Him. Faith is the currency in heaven, meaning if you want what heaven has to offer, you have to give faith out. Release faith out. And obedience is God's love language. That's how you tell Him that you love Him. So when they obeyed, the net became full of fish. John looked at all the fish in the net, and then he looked at the man standing on the shore. Because you see, John has been in this situation before. Peter, he tried all night long and could not catch a fish. Peter's been in this circumstance before. Peter has went all night long and not able to catch not one fish. But then Jesus came along, and He caught all this load of fish, so much that when He obeyed and threw down His net, He caught all of these fish so much that the boat was about to sink and the net was breaking, and He had to call for His friends to come and help Him. Those friends were James and John. So John, when he saw all these fish in the net, he's like, oh, I've been in this situation before. There is only one man who could make this happen, and it's the same man who did it before. And that was Jesus. He had had experience with Him. And that is why I believe in God. I have had so many experiences that only God could do. And He has proved Himself time and time and time again. Don't don't get me started on that. Don't get me started. Okay, so John yelled out, "It's Jesus!" That's who it is. Peter was so excited that he jumped right into the water. He did not want to wait for the boat to take him to Jesus. Jesus was near and Peter wanted to be with him. Remember, Peter denied Jesus in the garden, denied Jesus as he was being arrested and being on trial and being mistreated. Peter denied that he knew anything about Jesus. He's like, "I don't even know that man." And he even cussed. "I don't know," he wouldn't say his name, "I don't know the man." But after Jesus rose from the dead, Jesus and Peter had a private meeting. The Bible doesn't tell what was said or what anything. It just says that Jesus had met with Peter before. And so certainly their relationship was restored because they find out it's Jesus and Peter's like swimming out there to get to him. The other disciples brought the boat and all of the fish to shore. Leave it to Peter to leave everybody else to do the work. So they all get to the shore. And la-ti-di-da, drop my piece. Do-do-do-do. Better leave some room for Jesus. Make some room for Jesus. Okay. Okay. So they all get to shore. And when they got out of the boat, they saw a fire burning. And someone was cooking breakfast for them. Who do you think was making breakfast? You would be right. It was Jesus. That kind Jesus. The one who, "They that seek the Lord shall not want any good thing." They were tired and hungry and Jesus already knew. I love that about Jesus. He anticipated their need. And he wanted to show them that they can't go back to their old way of getting money for the things that they need. They've traveled with Jesus for 3 years. And they left their career of fishermen and followed Jesus. There were people in the group, there were people who gave money to Jesus and the disciples so that they could keep traveling to pay for their food, so that they could keep going from place to town to town to town. And so Jesus doesn't want them going back to this job. He has another job for them, and he wants them to see, "I can provide everything that you need to do what I call you to do." Jesus called his disciples to come and eat, and they ate. Jesus asked Peter 3 times if he loved him. He said, "Peter, do you love me?" And 3 times Jesus said, "Yes, Lord, I love you." And the last time, the 3rd time that Peter said to Jesus, he said, "You know that I love you." And in between these times, Jesus and the disciples knew that Peter was truly sorry, and that because he had denied Jesus. Jesus said to Peter, "Feed my sheep and feed my lambs." By this he meant, teach others about me. And that is why I do what I do. That's why I teach junior church and everything, is because God gives me so much that I have to feed someone else. The disciples were no longer sad. He was saying, teach people about me. They were no longer sad. Jesus had called them to be his disciples. Later, at Pentecost, we'll learn about that later, Peter preached and 3,000 people got saved and baptized in one day. So Jesus used Peter in great and mighty ways after this. And they had their private meeting and restored the relationship. And here Jesus is showing publicly that Peter is restored. He is his disciple. And I'm out of time, and I wanted to share a testimony of how God specifically fed me. But I'm out of time. You'll have to ask me about it. And have a great day.